Afternoon. Alright, so we are going to be talking about radical expressions. And there's going to be a few definitions that you're going to want to know. Let me move this a little bit. And let me move this. Okay, so square root, it's the number c is a square root of a if c squared equals a. Okay? Radical expression, an expression is written under a radical. So it's whatever the expression is that's written underneath the radical sign. Real number, it consists of the rational and the irrational numbers. I actually skipped radicand. Radicand is the expression that's written under the radical. And then you have an irrational number is a real number that cannot be written in the form a divided by b, where a and b are integers. And then the last thing is x squared equals the absolute value of x. This is going to be an important piece for us while we're doing some of our problems today. So it tells us we need to evaluate the square root of x plus 12 for x equals negative 6. So we're just going to simply take this and I'm going to plug it in here. So I get the square root of negative 6 plus 12. And that is going to be the square root of 6. And here, before we actually finish, we need to see if there's any perfect squares. So I'm going to abbreviate this as PS that go into 6. Perfect squares would be 1 squared is 1. I'll actually write this out slightly different so it might help you. 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25. These here are your first 5 perfect squares. Okay, and this is how you get them, and I would just keep going all the way out. 10 squared is 100, and there's some in between, and there's a lot of them after. So I need to see if any of these numbers go into 6, and the only one that does is 1, so it doesn't change anything. So then our answer is going to be 6. Let's take a number real quick, like the square root of 12. If I have the square root of 12, you need to simplify that. Well, I know 4 goes into 12. So I can actually write this as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. And one of the properties we're going to learn is that whenever you have multiplication under the radical, it tells you that you can actually separate it. So it'll be radical 4 times radical 3. And now I can simplify because the square root of 4 is 2. And the square root of 3 is just the square root of 3. Okay, so this is going to be an important concept as we're going through these as well. So anytime you're just evaluating, you're just going to plug this number in for the variable and then simplify. Determine the values of the variable that make each expression a real number. Now, the rule with radicals is that you can never have a negative under the radical. Okay, so that means that this right here, I can have any number under the radical except for a negative number. So that means I need to set what's here equal to 0. Okay? Or actually not equal to 0, because x can, this expression can be greater than or equal to 0. So now I solve for x, so I subtract 8 to both sides. I get 3x is greater than or equal to negative 8. I'm going to divide by 3, and I get that x has to be greater than or equal to negative 8 over 3. Okay? Now, why this is true is because this is going to be less than 3. So if I put 3 in here, if I put negative 3 in here, and I simplify this, that's negative 9 plus 8, which is the square root of negative 1. This is not a real number. Okay? This is what we call an irrational number. It's actually going to be what we call an imaginary number. which we won't really get a whole lot to. But this is an irrational number, okay? Now, if I try, this is actually as a mixed number, it's going to be 2 and 2/3. Yeah, this is going to be 2 and 2/3, negative 2 and 2/3. So if I was to try negative 2, that would be 3 times negative 2 plus 8. This would be negative 6 plus 8, which means I would have radical 2. This is a real number, okay, so that works. So the expression itself, the entire expression right here, cannot be less than 0. So you set this greater than or equal to 0, and you solve. The last one, and this is going to use this property. Okay. So this tells you the absolute, or the square root of x squared. Well, we know that the square root of x squared is the absolute value of x. And this says that the the square root of x squared is negative 7. So that means I can say this. Let me actually redo that here. Hold on just a second. I'm actually thinking about something here. Okay, so that means that since this is the absolute value of x, then I should be able to take the absolute value of 7, and I'm going to get that x equals 7. Okay, and if we check this, we'd say 7 squared, square root, 7 squared is 49, right? So that means now I have the square root of 49, which is going to be plus or minus 7. Okay, so that means x can actually equal negative 7, or it can be plus 7. So this would be your answer then, is that x would equal plus or minus 7. Okay, I apologize. Anyways, so let's go ahead and make sure you write down any of your steps and write down any questions you may have, and then I will answer them tomorrow and be ready to work tomorrow.